It's me or them.
But in the end, rather, she made a decision. ESPN certainly did not want to lose her. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it because I appreciate her and I'm going to miss her.
The silence surrounding Molly Qerim became louder than any statement she could have given. Her absence wasn't just an empty chair on First Take, it was a crack in ESPN's carefully polished facade. Every morning when Stephen A. Smith marched onto set, the energy felt different. The banter, the balance, the chemistry that Molly once anchored had been replaced by an atmosphere that felt strained, like a stage missing its centerpiece. Fans noticed. They pointed out how Stephen A. suddenly seemed less like a dynamic voice and more like a man trying to fill a void he couldn't cover with bravado alone. The way it all went down only fueled suspicions. One day she was there, the next day her name was scrubbed from graphics, her presence erased from the official channels like she'd never existed. ESPN wanted to call it business as usual, but even casual fans could see this was anything but routine. Overnight departures don't just happen at networks this big without someone pulling strings. The speed, the secrecy, the way internal memos ordered staff not to speculate, all of it reeked of a story ESPN didn't want told. And when a company works this hard to silence whispers, the whispers only grow louder. Stephen A. Smith didn't help his own case. On air, he put on the mask of sorrow, praising Molly for her professionalism and grace. But the tribute felt rehearsed, polished to the point of hollowness. Viewers noticed his words danced carefully around the why, as if the truth was sitting just offstage, too dangerous to acknowledge. Behind the scenes, staffers began leaking stories of escalating clashes between Stephen A. and Molly. Producers hinted at tension during meetings, arguments about airtime, segments erased from replay circulation after the two butted heads on live television. Some claimed Stephen A. went to executives directly, pushing for more control, more authority, more spotlight. And then, almost too conveniently, Molly was gone, and within days Stephen A. was crowned with a historic $100 million deal. To many, it looked less like coincidence and more like coronation. Fans weren't fooled. They saw the clips that vanished from ESPN's archives but kept resurfacing online. Stephen A. snapping during a commercial break, Molly correcting him mid-rant on live TV, visible tension breaking through the on-air professionalism. These weren't isolated incidents. They were glimpses into a power dynamic that had reached a breaking point. When Molly's Instagram post signed off with those two loaded words, "Stay tuned," it didn't read like a farewell. It read like a warning. A promise that her silence was temporary, and when she finally spoke, it would not be quiet. Behind closed doors, ESPN scrambled to contain the fallout. PR teams issued memos about reputational risk, social media managers were instructed to avoid amplifying Molly's name, and legal counsel reportedly went into overdrive. Rumors swirled of draft complaints being passed around, legal threats circulating, whispers that Molly was preparing to accuse not just the network but Stephen A. himself of creating a hostile work environment. Insiders insisted these were only drafts, not official filings, but the fact that multiple outlets claimed to have seen the documents was enough to send shockwaves through Bristol. If Molly truly was gearing up for battle, ESPN wasn't just looking at bad press. They were staring down the possibility of another full-blown scandal, one that could drag their biggest star into the courtroom spotlight. Stephen A. didn't do himself any favors when pressed about the details. He insisted he didn't know everything, but in the same breath rattled off contract timelines and insider-level details no one outside the executive circle should have known. Critics pounced. If he really didn't know, why was he speaking like a man with the playbook in his back pocket? The contradiction made his grief act look flimsy, and fans began to question whether his tears on set were genuine sorrow or theatrics designed to soften the blow. Rivals piled on, with Emmanuel Acho calling him out publicly, accusing him of betraying Molly's decade of loyalty with half-truths and evasions. It was a rare moment where Stephen A.'s dominance was checked not by producers or executives, but by peers who refused to let the narrative go unchallenged. Meanwhile, ESPN's moves made the whole situation look orchestrated. Within hours of Molly's farewell, Malika Andrews' contract extension was announced, rolled out with perfect timing that reeked of distraction. Insiders swore the package had been prepped days in advance, suggesting the network knew Molly's exit was coming and had already lined up the next act. The optics were terrible. Fans saw it not as a seamless transition but as a sloppy cover-up, like the network was pulling a fire alarm to divert attention from the blaze they couldn't extinguish. Even advertisers grew wary, with at least one major sponsor reportedly demanding reassurances before committing new dollars to First Take. ESPN was trying to project strength, but the cracks in the foundation were impossible to hide. And yet, Stephen A.'s empire only expanded. While the storm raged around Molly's departure, his face was everywhere. New NFL responsibilities, expanded NBA coverage, podcasts, promos. It wasn't just business as usual. It was a deliberate bet on one man, a bet that ESPN was willing to sacrifice relationships, reputations, even long-term stability to win. For some, it looked like ruthless business sense. For others, it looked like hubris, a company putting all its chips on a single voice and daring the world to challenge it. But in doing so, they may have created their biggest vulnerability yet. Because if Molly decides to speak, if she decides to take this fight public, Stephen A. isn't the only one exposed. The entire network, from top executives to PR strategists, would be dragged into the light. For now, Molly's silence remains her sharpest weapon. Every day she refuses to explain, fans fill in the gaps themselves, building narratives that only grow more damning. Every throwback clip that trends, every fan hashtag demanding answers, every rumor of legal action adds fuel to the fire. ESPN wants control, but they don't have it. The narrative belongs to Molly now, and all she has to do is sit back and watch the storm build until the moment she decides to strike. That cryptic smile, that "stay tuned," it hangs over the network like a storm cloud, promising thunder they can't outrun. The question isn't whether this story will explode. It's when and how big the blast will be. Will Molly walk into a courtroom and shatter ESPN's mask of control? Will she drop a tell-all that exposes the culture behind the glossy sets and million-dollar contracts? Or will she play the long game, letting the speculation eat away at Stephen A.'s empire until it collapses under the weight of its own contradictions? For now, nobody knows. Not the executives scrambling to hold the line, not the fans dissecting every silence, and maybe not even Molly herself. But one thing is certain, this wasn't just an exit. This was the opening move in a much bigger war, and the final chapter hasn't even begun.